The rain hammered against my roof like nature's own percussion section. And here I was at midnight, crawling around with a flashlight and a bucket of roofing cement, trying to patch the latest leak before it turned my bedroom into an indoor swimming pool. My name is Jake Morrison, and if you're wondering what kind of man spends his Friday night playing amateur roofer in a thunderstorm, the answer is simple. The kind whose wife thinks home maintenance is beneath her newly elevated status. "Jake!" The screech came from downstairs, cutting through the storm like a rusty blade. "Get down here right now." I sighed, wiping rain from my eyes. 3 years of marriage, and Jennifer had perfected the art of timing her demands for maximum inconvenience. I climbed down from the roof, water dripping from my work clothes onto the hardwood floors she'd insisted we couldn't afford, but somehow managed to finance anyway. The scene in our living room looked like a tornado had hit an electronics store. My laptop lay in pieces across the coffee table, the screen cracked into a spiderweb pattern, keys scattered like confetti. Jennifer stood over the wreckage, her designer yoga outfit pristine despite the destruction she'd apparently just unleashed. "Now you'll pay attention to me," she screamed, her face flushed with the kind of righteous anger that comes from too much wine and too little self-awareness. I stared at the remains of my computer, the machine that held 3 years of construction project files, client contacts, and financial records. "Nothing says healthy communication like a Lenovo in pieces," I said, my voice flat. "Don't you dare use that sarcastic tone with me," Jennifer snapped. "I'm tired of competing with that stupid machine for your attention." The irony wasn't lost on me. This from the woman who spent most evenings glued to her phone, texting colleagues from her architectural firm about projects I wasn't sophisticated enough to understand. But pointing that out would only escalate things, and I was too tired for another 3-hour argument about respect and emotional availability. "I'll clean this up in the morning," I said, bending to collect the larger pieces. "Leave it," she commanded. "I want you to see what happens when you ignore your wife." I straightened up, studying her face in the lamplight. Something was different tonight. The anger felt performed, theatrical, like she was picking a fight for reasons that had nothing to do with my laptop usage. "Fine," I said. "I'm going to bed." "That's right, just walk away. That's what you always do." I paused at the bottom of the stairs. "What do you want from me, Jen? Really?" For a moment, her mask slipped. I saw something that looked almost like guilt flicker across her features. Then it was gone, replaced by that familiar expression of wounded superiority. "I want a husband who acts like he's married," she said quietly. Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The next morning, I drove to the police station with a box containing the remains of my laptop. Officer Patricia Wells, a woman I'd known since high school, looked up from her desk with barely concealed amusement. "Let me guess," she said. "Domestic dispute?" "Property destruction," I corrected, setting the box on her desk. "I need to file a report." Patricia examined the broken computer, making notes on her form. "Jake, you know this is going to be a pain in the rear for everyone involved, right? Including your wife?" "That's kind of the point." She looked up sharply. "That doesn't sound like you." "Maybe you don't know me as well as you think." Patricia leaned back in her chair, studying me with the careful attention of someone who'd spent 15 years reading people's intentions. "Your wife's been here before, you know, about 6 months ago. Filed a complaint about harassment, then dropped it the next day." My stomach tightened. "Harassment from who?" "Can't say officially. But between you and me? Some height shot from her office was getting unwanted attention from his ex-girlfriend. Your wife came in as a character witness." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral while my mind raced. Jennifer had never mentioned any workplace drama involving harassment. In fact, she'd been unusually secretive about her colleagues lately, deflecting questions about her frequent late nights and weekend team-building events. "Thanks for the information," I said. "Jake?" Patricia called as I reached the door. "Be careful. When marriages start involving police reports, things tend to get ugly fast." I spent the rest of the day working on a kitchen renovation for the Hendersons, trying to lose myself in the familiar rhythm of measuring, cutting, and fitting. Physical labor had always been my meditation, the one place where problems had clear solutions and progress was measurable. But my mind kept drifting back to Patricia's words. Jennifer had been at the police station 6 months ago, around the time she'd started working late and coming home with stories about her brilliant new colleague, David Crane. David owned a luxury car dealership in the next town over, but apparently his real passion was consulting on high-end residential projects. Jennifer spoke about him with the kind of breathless admiration she'd once reserved for me, back when my ability to fix anything and build everything had impressed her. That evening, I decided to do some investigating of my own. Jennifer was at another client dinner, so I had the house to myself. I started with her home office, a converted bedroom filled with architectural drawings and design magazines. Her desk was meticulously organized, everything in its proper place except for a small stack of receipts rubber-banded together and shoved in the back of the bottom drawer. Hotel receipts. The Lakeside Motel, a rundown place about 20 minutes outside town that catered to truckers and people who paid cash for privacy. 3 receipts, all from the past 2 months. All for the same room, all paid for with Jennifer's credit card. I sat back in her chair, staring at the evidence in my hands. The smart thing would be to confront her directly, to give her a chance to explain. But something told me I needed more information before I made my move. The next afternoon, I drove out to the Lakeside Motel. The place looked exactly like what it was, a relic from the 1960s that had seen better decades. The parking lot was mostly empty except for a few long-haul trucks and a familiar silver BMW. Jennifer's car. I parked across the street and waited. 20 minutes later, she emerged from room 12, followed by a tall man in an expensive suit, David Crane. I recognized him from the photo on his dealership's website. They stood by Jennifer's car for a few minutes, talking in the intimate way of people who were comfortable with each other's bodies. He touched her arm. She laughed at something he said. Then they kissed, and it wasn't the quick peck of business associates. I sat in my truck watching my wife embrace another man and felt something cold and calculating settle in my chest. Not heartbreak, exactly. More like the moment when you realize a building's foundation is compromised and needs to be torn down completely before you can start over. But as I prepared to leave, I noticed another car parked at the far end of the lot, a red Honda Civic that belonged to Jennifer's best friend, Lisa Martinez. What was she doing here? I waited until Jennifer and David left, then drove home. That evening, Jennifer came through the door with shopping bags and a story about finding the perfect fixtures for her latest project. "How was your day?" she asked, the picture of innocent domesticity. "Educational?" I said. That night, after Jennifer fell asleep, I found an envelope that had been slipped under our front door. Inside were photographs. Jennifer and David at the motel, Jennifer and David at a restaurant, Jennifer and David in what looked like his office, her hand on his chest. At the bottom of the stack was a note written in block letters. "You deserve better. Get even." I stared at the photos, wondering who my anonymous benefactor might be. Then I remembered Lisa's car at the motel. Was Jennifer's best friend documenting the affair? And if so, why was she helping me? I went to the kitchen and poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey. Outside, the wind was picking up again, rattling the windows of our house. The house I'd spent 2 years renovating with my own hands, the house that was supposed to be our foundation for the future. "Well," I said to the empty room, "this should be interesting." Monday morning arrived with the kind of gray, oppressive sky that makes you want to crawl back under the covers and pretend the world doesn't exist. Unfortunately, I had 3 estimates to deliver and a bathroom renovation to finish, which meant facing the world whether I wanted to or not. The Hendersons' kitchen was coming along nicely. I'd spent the morning installing crown molding, losing myself in the precise angles and clean lines. Physical work had always been my sanctuary, the one place where problems had clear solutions and effort produced visible results. "Looking good, Jake," Mrs. Henderson said, bringing me a cup of coffee. "Jennifer must be proud of your craftsmanship." "She's more interested in other people's work these days," I said before I could stop myself. Mrs. Henderson raised an eyebrow but didn't press. Small towns thrive on gossip, but the smart residents know when to listen and when to mind their own business. Around noon, I decided to grab lunch at the Rusty Anchor, the kind of working-class bar where the beer is cold, the food is honest, and everyone knows everyone else's business whether they want to or not. The moment I walked in, conversation died like someone had flipped a switch. "Hey, Jake," called out Tommy Reeves from behind the bar. "Heard you had some excitement at home the other night." News of the police report had apparently made the rounds. In a town of 8,000 people, a domestic dispute involving property destruction was prime entertainment. "Just some technical difficulties," I said, sliding onto a bar stool. "Technical difficulties," repeated Pete Kowalski, a plumber I'd worked with on several projects. "That what we're calling it when wives go crazy on their husbands' computers?" The other patrons chuckled. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting to see how I'd handle being the subject of their amusement. 6 months ago, I would have laughed it off, bought a round, and changed the subject. But 6 months ago, I didn't know my wife was having an affair. "Sometimes you have to document things," I said quietly, "for legal purposes." The laughter stopped. Tommy set a beer in front of me without being asked. Legal purposes?" Pete's voice had lost its joking tone. Divorce lawyers like paperwork, I said, taking a long drink. Helps establish patterns of behavior. The silence that followed was the kind that makes bartenders nervous. Tommy busied himself wiping down glasses while the other patrons suddenly found their own drinks fascinating. Sorry to hear that, Jake, Pete finally said. Jennifer seemed like good people. People change, I said. Sometimes they show you who they really are. I finished my beer and left, feeling the weight of their stares on my back. By tomorrow, half the town would know that Jake Morrison was heading for divorce court. By the end of the week, the other half would have heard why. That evening, Jennifer came home with news about the neighborhood barbecue at the Williams' house on Saturday. It'll be good for us to get out together, she said. Show people we're a strong couple. Are we? I asked. She looked up from her phone, where she'd been texting someone. Are we what? A strong couple. Of course we are. Why would you ask that? I studied her face, looking for any sign of guilt or discomfort. But Jennifer had always been good at compartmentalizing, at keeping different parts of her life separate and organized. No reason, I said. Just making sure we're on the same page. Saturday arrived with perfect barbecue weather. Sunny, warm, with just enough breeze to keep the mosquitoes at bay. The Williams family had invited half the neighborhood, and their backyard was filled with the usual suspects. Young families, retired couples, and the handful of single professionals who were slowly gentrifying our working-class corner of town. Jennifer worked the crowd like a politician, chatting with the wives about interior design trends and laughing at the husbands' jokes about home improvement disasters. She was in her element, the center of attention, the successful career woman who'd managed to maintain her small-town roots. I was helping Bob Williams manage the grill when David Crane arrived. Hope you don't mind, Jennifer called out, waving him over. I invited David. He's been working with our firm on the Morrison Creek development. David approached with the confident stride of a man who'd never doubted his welcome anywhere. He was tall, well-dressed, and carried himself with the kind of casual arrogance that comes from inherited wealth and unearned privilege. You must be Jake, he said, extending a manicured hand. I've heard so much about you. Have you? I shook his hand, noting the softness of his palm, the absence of calluses or scars that came from actual work. Jennifer talks about your renovation projects all the time. She's very proud of your craftsmanship. That's interesting, I said. She doesn't mention you much at all. David's smile faltered slightly. Well, we've only been working together for a few months. 6 months, I said. Since January. Right, January. He recovered quickly, but I'd seen the flash of surprise in his eyes. Time flies when you're busy. Jennifer appeared at David's elbow, carrying 2 glasses of wine. I see you two have met, she said brightly. Just getting acquainted, David said, accepting his wine. Jake was telling me about your renovation projects. Actually, I said, I was asking David about his consulting work. Must be interesting, advising architects when you're in the car business. I have a lot of interests, David said smoothly. Real estate, design, investment opportunities. Diversification is key in today's economy. Diversification, I repeated. That's one word for it. Jennifer shot me a warning look. David has some fascinating insights into luxury market trends. I bet he does. The conversation continued for another few minutes, with Jennifer steering us toward safer topics like the weather and local politics. But I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she kept glancing between David and me like she was waiting for something to explode. Later, as the sun began to set and the citronella candles came out, I found myself standing near the dessert table when David approached with a fresh glass of wine in his hand. Beautiful evening, he said, positioning himself next to me. Sure is. You know, Jake, I hope there are no hard feelings about the consulting work. Business is business. Hard feelings about what? David's smile was razor thin. Come on, we're both adults here. Jennifer's told me about the problems at home, the arguments, the police reports. It must be difficult watching your marriage fall apart. I turned to face him fully. What exactly did she tell you? That you've become controlling, possessive, that you can't handle her success? He took a sip of wine, his eyes never leaving mine. She's a remarkable woman. She deserves someone who appreciates her ambition. Someone like you? Someone who can match her intellectually, professionally, financially. I nodded slowly. That's an interesting perspective. It's reality, Jake. Jennifer has outgrown this place. She needs someone who can help her reach her potential. And you're that someone? I could be. I picked up a glass of red wine from the dessert table, examining the dark liquid in the fading light. You know what I think, David. What's that? I think you're about to learn something about reality yourself." I tilted the glass, letting the wine splash across the front of his expensive white shirt. The red liquid spread like a stain across the pristine fabric, dripping onto his designer shoes. "Oops," I said. Clumsy of me. David's face went white, then red. "You son of a—" "Careful," I interrupted. "We're at a family barbecue." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You have no idea who you're messing with." "Actually, I think I do. You're a small-town car dealer who thinks sleeping with other men's wives makes him sophisticated. But here's what you don't understand, David. I built this house with my own hands. I know every nail, every wire, every pipe. And when I decide to tear something down, it stays down. Is that a threat? It's a promise." David shoved me, his hands hitting my chest with surprising force. I stumbled backward, bumping into the dessert table and sending a chocolate cake sliding toward the ground. The sound of shattering plates brought the entire party to a halt. Suddenly, we were the center of attention, two grown men facing off over spilled wine and hurt pride. "Gentlemen, please," Bob Williams called out, hurrying over with his wife close behind. Jennifer appeared at David's side, her face a mask of embarrassment and anger. "Jake, what is wrong with you?" "Ask your boyfriend," I said, loud enough for the entire party to hear. The silence that followed was deafening. 30 people standing in awkward witness to the public destruction of a marriage. "I think we should go," Jennifer said quietly. "Good idea," I agreed. "All three of us have some talking to do." But when I turned around, David was already walking toward the gate, his wine-stained shirt a banner of humiliation in the gathering dusk. Jennifer and I drove home in silence, the weight of unspoken accusations filling the car like smoke. As we pulled into our driveway, I noticed a familiar red Honda parked across the street. Lisa Martinez was watching us, her face barely visible in the shadows of her car. "Interesting evening," I said to Jennifer as we walked to the front door. "You embarrassed me," she replied, "in front of the entire neighborhood." "I embarrassed you?" I stopped walking. "That's what you're worried about? You acted like a jealous child." "Maybe because my wife is having an affair with a car dealer who thinks he's God's gift to architecture." Jennifer's hand froze on the door handle. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Room 12 at the Lakeside Motel. 3 visits in 2 months. Should I go on?" She turned to face me, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. "Jake, I can explain." "I'm sure you can, but I'm not interested in explanations anymore." I walked past her into the house, leaving her standing on the porch with her secrets and her lies. Tomorrow, I decided, the real work would begin. Sunday morning brought the kind of clarity that comes after a storm. I woke up early, made coffee, and sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and a pen, making lists like I was planning a construction project. In a way, I suppose I was, the systematic deconstruction of the life Jennifer and David had built on the foundation of my ignorance. The house felt different now that the pretense was over, quieter, more honest. Jennifer had spent the night in the guest room, and I could hear her moving around upstairs, probably packing a bag for another extended business trip. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Check your email, a friend." The email contained a detailed dossier on David Crane that would have impressed a private investigator. Financial records, business partnerships, customer complaints, even a few photographs of him at various social events with women who definitely weren't business associates. The most interesting item was a court filing from 2 years ago, a lawsuit from a former business partner who accused David of fraudulent misrepresentation in the sale of a vintage Mustang. The case had been settled out of court, but the paperwork painted a picture of a man who was comfortable bending the truth when it served his purposes. I printed everything and added it to my growing file. Knowledge, I was learning, was its own form of power. Jennifer came downstairs around 10, dressed for travel with a small suitcase in her hand. "I'm going to stay with Lisa for a few days," she announced, "until you calm down." "Take all the time you need," I said without looking up from my paperwork. "What are you doing?" "Research, due diligence, the kind of homework I should have done months ago." She set down her suitcase and approached the table. "Jake, we need to talk about this like adults. Adults don't sneak around motel rooms with other people's spouses. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. The only question is how long it's been going on and how many people knew about it before I did." Jennifer sat down across from me, her hands folded in her lap like a schoolgirl called to the principal's office. "It started as a professional relationship. I'm sure it did. David was consulting on the Morrison Creek project, and we began working closely together. He's brilliant, Jake. His insights into luxury market demographics are—" "I don't care about his insights," I interrupted. "I care about my wife having an affair. It wasn't supposed to happen. We tried to keep things professional, but there was this connection, this intellectual compatibility that I'd never experienced before. I looked up from my papers. Intellectual compatibility? Is that what we're calling it? You don't understand. David sees potential in me that no one else has ever recognized. He believes I could be designing major commercial projects, maybe even start my own firm. And what does he want in return for all this career guidance? Jennifer's cheeks flushed. It's not like that? It's exactly like that. He's a predator, Jen. This is what he does. Find ambitious women who feel underappreciated and convince them that he's the key to their success. You're jealous because he can offer me opportunities you never could. The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. I set down my pen and really looked at my wife, trying to see past the anger and hurt to the person I'd once loved. You're probably right, I said finally. I can't offer you a luxury lifestyle or introduce you to important clients or take you to fancy restaurants in the city. All I can offer is a solid house, honest work, and a husband who comes home every night. That's not enough anymore. Then we don't have anything else to discuss. Jennifer picked up her suitcase and headed for the door. When you're ready to have a mature conversation about our future, call me. Our future ended at the Lakeside Motel, I said. Everything else is just paperwork. After she left, I spent the rest of the day making phone calls. My first stop was the office of Patricia Wells, the police officer who'd taken my report about the laptop. Jake, she said, looking up from her desk with surprise. What brings you back here? I need some advice about divorce proceedings, specifically about protecting assets and documenting adultery. Patricia leaned back in her chair. This is about your wife and that car dealer, isn't it? You know about David Crane? Small town, Jake. People talk, especially when someone's flashing money around and making promises about big development projects. What kind of promises? The kind that usually turn out to be too good to be true. Word is, he's been courting several local businesses, offering to help them expand their operations in exchange for partnership deals. I filed that information away for future use. What about the divorce angle? That's outside my expertise, but I can tell you that documented evidence of adultery can be helpful in asset division cases. Photographs, financial records, witness testimony. What about recordings? Patricia gave me a sharp look. Depends on how they were obtained. Massachusetts is a two-party consent state for recording conversations. But if someone voluntarily provides information in a public setting, that's different. I thanked Patricia and drove home, my mind working through possibilities. That evening, I called my old boxing coach, Mickey Sullivan, and asked if we could meet at the gym. Mickey had trained fighters for 40 years before retiring to run a small gym that catered more to weekend warriors than professional athletes. He was the kind of man who understood that sometimes life required you to fight back, even when the odds weren't in your favor. You look like hell, kid, he said as I walked into the gym. Feel worse than I look. Woman trouble? The worst kind. Mickey led me to his office, a cluttered space that smelled of liniment and old leather. Tell me about it. I laid out the whole story, the affair, the lies, the public humiliation at the barbecue. Mickey listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of understanding. So what do you want to do about it? He asked when I finished. I want them to pay, both of them. I want everyone in this town to know exactly what kind of people they are. Revenge is a dangerous game, Jake. Sometimes you end up hurting yourself more than your enemies. Maybe, but doing nothing feels worse than taking a beating. Mickey studied my face for a long moment. You remember what I used to tell you about fighting dirty opponents? Hit them where it hurts most. Make it count. Don't give them a chance to recover. That's right. But you also have to be smart about it. Emotional fighters make mistakes. They telegraph their punches, drop their guard, forget to protect themselves. So, what are you saying? I'm saying, if you're going to do this, do it right. Plan it out. Think 3 moves ahead. And remember, the goal isn't just to hurt them, it's to win. I left the gym with a clearer sense of purpose and a specific plan taking shape in my mind. Over the next few days, I began implementing what I came to think of as my construction project in reverse. Instead of building something up, I was going to tear something down, piece by piece, until nothing remained but rubble. My first target was David's business reputation. Using the information from my anonymous source, I created several fake online accounts and began posting detailed reviews of Crane luxury motors on every platform I could find. Google, Yelp, Better Business Bureau, automotive forums. The reviews were factual but devastating. Complaints about overpriced vehicles, high-pressure sales tactics, and questionable business practices. I was careful to vary the writing style and include specific details that would make each review seem authentic. Within a week, David's 5-star rating had dropped to 3 stars, and potential customers were asking pointed questions about his business practices. My second target was Jennifer's social circle. I began making strategic comments at the bar, the hardware store, and other places where local gossip took root and spread. Nothing dramatic or obviously malicious, just casual observations about how success sometimes changes people, how some folks forget where they come from when they start running with a different crowd. Small towns have long memories and strong opinions about loyalty. By the end of the week, I could see the shift in how people responded to Jennifer's name. The warmth was gone, replaced by a coolness that would only grow over time. But my most effective weapon turned out to be patience. I simply waited, knowing that people like David and Jennifer eventually reveal their true nature to anyone paying attention. The revelation came on Thursday evening, when Lisa Martinez called my house. "Jake, we need to talk. Can you meet me at the Rusty Anchor in an hour?" "What's this about, Lisa?" "It's about Jennifer and David, and some things you need to know before you make any permanent decisions." I arrived at the bar to find Lisa sitting in a corner booth, looking nervous and guilty. She'd ordered 2 beers and was picking at the label on hers like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "Thanks for coming," she said as I sat down. "This is about the photographs, isn't it? You're my anonymous friend." Lisa nodded miserably. "I never meant for things to go this far." "Why don't you start from the beginning?" It started about 8 months ago. Jennifer began talking about this amazing consultant who was going to help her career take off. She was so excited, so full of plans and dreams. I was happy for her, you know? She seemed more alive than she'd been in years. "When did you realize it was more than business?" "About 6 months ago. She started asking me to cover for her, to say she was with me when she was really with David, little lies at first, then bigger ones." "And you went along with it?" "I thought it was just a phase, a midlife crisis or something. I figured she'd come to her senses and end it before anyone got hurt. But she didn't. No, it got worse. She started talking about leaving you, about starting a new life with David. She said you were holding her back, that you couldn't understand her ambitions." I took a long drink of beer, tasting the bitterness. "So why are you telling me this now?" "Because of what I heard last night. Jennifer came over crying, saying David was pulling back, that he wasn't returning her calls. She was talking about confronting his wife, about making him choose between them." "David's married?" "Separated, but yeah. And here's the thing, Jake. I don't think he ever intended to leave his wife for Jennifer. I think she was just entertainment for him." "What makes you say that?" Lisa reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. "Because of this conversation I recorded last week." She hit play, and David's voice filled the space between us. "Look, Jennifer's a nice distraction, but she's getting too serious about this whole thing. I never promised her anything permanent. She's married, I'm married, we're both adults having some fun. But she's starting to talk about the future like we're going to run away together or something." Another voice, male, laughing. "Sounds like you've got yourself a stage 5 clinger." "Pretty much. The problem is she's useful for the Morrison Creek project. Her firm has connections I need, and she's been feeding me inside information about the bidding process. I can't cut her loose until that deal is finalized." "So what are you going to do?" "String her along for another month or 2, then find a reason to cool things off. Maybe tell her I'm working things out with my wife. Women eat that stuff up." The recording ended, leaving us sitting in silence. "There's more," Lisa said quietly. "About the Morrison Creek development. David's been using Jennifer to get information about competing bids, then undercutting them with his own proposals. She doesn't know she's being used for corporate espionage." I stared at Lisa, processing the implications. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because Jennifer's my friend, and she's about to get her heart broken and her career destroyed by a man who sees her as a disposable asset, and because you deserve to know the truth about what you're fighting." "What do you want me to do with this information?" "I want you to stop them both before they destroy themselves and everyone around them." I finished my beer and stood up. "Lisa, I appreciate you telling me this. But you should know, I'm not trying to save Jennifer anymore. I'm trying to bury David Crane so deep he never sees daylight again." "Jake, and if Jennifer gets buried with him, that's her choice." I left Lisa sitting in the booth and walked out into the night air, my mind already working through the possibilities this new information presented. It was time to move from defense to offense. Friday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth and the kind of brilliant sunshine that makes everything look sharp and clear. I woke up early, made coffee, and sat on my back porch, watching the sun rise over the trees behind my house. It felt like the calm before a storm, and I suppose it was. My plan for David Crane had evolved from simple revenge to something far more intricate, complete professional and personal destruction, executed with the precision of a controlled demolition. The recording that Lisa had shared gave me everything I needed to bring both David and Jennifer down simultaneously. It was a perfect opportunity, but I knew I had to approach it methodically. My goal wasn't just to expose them, it was to dismantle everything they had built. But before I could pull the trigger on the destruction, I had to lay the groundwork. I started by calling Jennifer's office, requesting a conversation with her boss, Margaret Holloway. Margaret was someone I knew well from various company parties. She was sharp, ethical, and above all, incredibly protective of her firm's reputation. If there was anyone who would understand the magnitude of what I was about to show her, it was Margaret. "Jake," Margaret said when she picked up the phone, her voice warm but professional. "How nice to hear from you. How are things?" "Complicated," I said, keeping it vague. "I was wondering if we could meet for coffee. There's something I need to discuss with you about the Morrison Creek project." "Is everything all right?" she asked, concern creeping into her voice. "I'd prefer to discuss it in person, if you don't mind." There was a slight pause, and then she agreed. "All right, let's meet at 11 at the coffee shop downtown. I'll be there." I spent the next few hours preparing my presentation. I gathered copies of the recording Lisa had given me, along with detailed documentation of David's questionable business practices. I created a timeline that clearly showed how Jennifer's behavior had shifted ever since she began her relationship with him. It was all laid out, carefully planned, and ready to make its impact. Margaret arrived exactly on time, as expected. She looked professional in her tailored suit, her face already reflecting a hint of concern. Margaret was the type of person who'd climbed the corporate ladder through diligence and caution. She had an eye for detail and a deep respect for the integrity of the business world. She'd understand exactly what was at stake. "Thank you for meeting me," I said as she took a seat, her gaze still cautious. "Of course," Margaret replied, settling into her chair. "Though I have to admit, I'm curious about what this is regarding." I slid the folder across the table, watching her carefully as she opened it. Inside were the hotel receipts, the timeline, and the most damning piece of evidence, the transcript of David's recorded conversation about using Jennifer for insider information. I could see the change in her face as she began to process the contents, her eyebrows furrowing, her lips pressing into a thin line as she absorbed the full weight of the situation. "This is very serious," Margaret said after a long pause, her voice laced with disbelief. "It gets worse," I replied, leaning in slightly. "David has been using the information Jennifer provided to undercut competing bids on the Morrison Creek development. She might not realize it, but she's been unknowingly committing corporate espionage." Margaret closed the folder and met my eyes directly. "Why are you bringing this to me instead of confronting Jennifer directly?" she asked, her voice laced with both concern and a hint of defensiveness. "Because I already tried that," I said, keeping my tone calm. "She's convinced herself that David is her ticket to bigger and better things. She doesn't see that he's using her for his own gain. And now it's beyond her to understand the depth of the mess she's in." "And you want me to what exactly?" Margaret's expression was a mixture of concern and curiosity. "I want you to protect your firm's reputation before this becomes public knowledge. Because, Margaret, it will. Small towns don't keep secrets forever, and this is something that could destroy everything your firm has built." Margaret took a deep breath, processing everything I had just laid out for her. "I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, Jake. But of course, I'll need to investigate these allegations thoroughly." "Of course," I nodded. "But I should make it clear that I also have audio recordings of David discussing his strategy, how he's been manipulating Jennifer and extracting information from her. These recordings provide more than enough proof." "You have recordings?" Margaret asked, her voice now laced with shock. "A mutual friend of ours provided them," I said, my voice steady. "Someone who is genuinely concerned about Jennifer's well-being, as well as the reputation of your firm." Margaret finished her coffee without saying anything more, her mind clearly racing. She stood up, adjusted her suit, and looked at me with newfound determination. "I'll be in touch, Jake. Thank you for handling this with such discretion." As she walked away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. The first step had been taken. Margaret Holloway was the kind of person who didn't act lightly. She would investigate, and when she did, everything would come crashing down on David and Jennifer. It was only a matter of time, and once the destruction began, there would be no stopping it. After she left, I drove to David's car dealership. Crane Luxury Motors occupied a gleaming showroom on the main commercial strip, all glass and chrome and carefully arranged expensive automobiles. David's pride and joy was a restored 1967 Camaro that sat in the center of the showroom like a shrine to automotive perfection. I walked around the lot, pretending to browse, until I spotted David through the office window. He was on the phone, gesturing animatedly, probably trying to smooth over another dissatisfied customer complaint generated by my online review campaign. That evening, I put the final phase of my plan into motion. I drove to the dealership after closing time, parked across the street, and waited. The lot was protected by a basic security system and a single camera focused on the main entrance, but the rear of the building was a blind spot. I'd brought a small toolkit and a few supplies, a bag of sugar, a bottle of paint stripper, and a can of black spray paint. Nothing illegal, just the kind of minor vandalism that would send a very specific message. David's personal car was parked behind the building, a silver Mercedes that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. I poured the sugar into his gas tank, applied the paint stripper to his hood in the shape of a heart, and spray-painted Cheater across his windshield. Then I moved to the showroom window and added my signature to the pristine glass. Ask David about Jennifer in large, unmistakable letters. The whole operation took less than 10 minutes. I was back in my truck and driving home before the security patrol made its next round. Saturday morning brought the payoff I'd been waiting for. My phone rang at 7 a.m. with a call from Lisa. "Jake, you need to know what's happening. Jennifer's at my house crying. David called her last night and told her they needed to take a break." "A break?" He said the situation was getting too complicated, that people were starting to talk, and he needed to focus on his marriage and his business. He told her it was better for both of them if they kept things professional from now on. How did she take it? About as well as you'd expect. She's talking about confronting him at his office, demanding an explanation. I think she's going to do something stupid. Let her. Jake, she's still your wife. Not for much longer. I hung up and spent the morning working on a bathroom renovation, trying to stay busy while the pieces of my plan fell into place. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check the local news website. The headline read, "Local car dealer's showroom vandalized." The article included a photo of David's building with my message clearly visible on the window and a quote from David claiming he had no idea why anyone would target his business. But the real story was in the comments section, where anonymous users were sharing rumors and speculation about David's personal life, his business practices, and his relationship with a married architect from town. By evening, the story had grown legs. Social media was buzzing with gossip, theories, and increasingly detailed accounts of David and Jennifer's affair. Someone had posted photos from the neighborhood barbecue, showing the confrontation between David and me, with captions speculating about the cause of our conflict. Sunday brought the reckoning I'd been building toward. Jennifer showed up at my house unannounced, looking haggard and desperate. "We need to talk," she said, pushing past me into the living room. "I'm listening." "David says you've been harassing him, vandalizing his property, posting fake reviews online, spreading rumors about his business." "David says a lot of things. Most of them are lies. He thinks you're having some kind of breakdown. He's talking about getting a restraining order." I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "A restraining order. That's rich. This has to stop, Jake. You're embarrassing yourself and me." "I'm embarrassing you. That's interesting, considering you're the one who's been sneaking around motel rooms for the past 6 months." Jennifer's face flushed. "That's over. David and I have decided to end our personal relationship and keep things professional." "David decided. You didn't have any choice in the matter." "That's not true." "Isn't it? Let me ask you something, Jen. Did David ever mention that he was using you to get inside information about competing bids? Did he explain that you were helping him commit corporate espionage?" The color drained from Jennifer's face. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the Morrison Creek development. I'm talking about how David pumped you for information about your firm's bidding strategy, then used that information to undercut your proposals." "That's impossible." "Is it? When did you first tell David about the Morrison Creek project? When did you start sharing details about your firm's approach? And when did David's company suddenly become a major player in local development deals?" Jennifer sat down heavily on the couch, her hands shaking slightly. "You don't understand the situation." "I understand it perfectly. David played you, Jen. He used your feelings for him to get access to confidential information, and when he was done with you, he threw you away like a used tissue." "You're lying." "Am I? Ask Margaret Holloway. She'll be calling you into her office first thing Monday morning to discuss your future with the firm." Jennifer looked up sharply. "What did you do?" "I did what any concerned citizen would do. I reported suspected corporate espionage to the appropriate authorities." "You destroyed my career." "No, Jen. You destroyed your career. I just documented it." Jennifer stood up, her face twisted with rage and desperation. "You're going to pay for this. Both of you are going to pay." "Both of who?" "You and whoever's been helping you. Lisa, probably. She's been acting strange lately, asking weird questions, making excuses not to spend time with me." I kept my expression neutral. "Lisa's your friend. Why would she help me?" "Because she's jealous. She's always been jealous of my success, my marriage, everything I have that she doesn't." "Had," I corrected. "Everything you had." Jennifer stormed out, slamming the door behind her hard enough to rattle the windows. I watched through the living room window as she sat in her car for several minutes, probably trying to decide what to do next. My phone rang. David Crane's name appeared on the caller ID. "Hello, David." "You son of a gun," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I know what you've been doing." "Do you?" "The reviews, the vandalism, the rumors. You think you're clever, but you're just a small-town nobody with delusions of relevance. That's an interesting perspective from a man who's about to lose his business license. What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about corporate espionage, David. I'm talking about using pillow talk to gain competitive advantages in bidding processes. I'm talking about the kind of behavior that gets people investigated by the state attorney general's office." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds. "You can't prove anything," David finally said. "Actually, I can. I have recordings, David. Recordings of you bragging about how easy it was to manipulate Jennifer, how useful she was for getting inside information, how you never had any intention of leaving your wife for her. That's impossible." "Is it? You might want to be more careful about who's listening when you're sharing your conquest stories with your buddies." "What do you want?" "I want you gone, David. Out of this town, away from my wife, and preferably out of business entirely." "And if I refuse?" "Then Monday morning, those recordings go to the State Attorney General, the Better Business Bureau, your wife's divorce attorney, and every local news outlet within 50 miles. You're bluffing. Try me." I hung up and poured myself a glass of whiskey, feeling the satisfaction of a job well done. Tomorrow would bring the final act of this drama, and I intended to enjoy every minute of it. Outside, the sun was setting over the trees behind my house, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded me of fire. Monday morning dawned gray and cold, with the kind of persistent drizzle that turns everything soggy and miserable. I woke up early, made coffee, and sat at my kitchen table, watching the rain streak down the windows while I waited for the phone calls I knew were coming. The first call came at 8:15. Margaret Holloway's voice was crisp and professional, with an undercurrent of barely controlled anger. "Jake, I wanted to thank you for bringing this situation to my attention. We've completed our preliminary investigation, and I'm afraid the evidence is quite damning." "What did you find?" "Email records showing Jennifer shared confidential bidding information with David Crane on at least 6 occasions over the past 4 months. Phone records confirming regular contact outside of normal business hours. And most problematically, evidence that David's company used that information to submit competing bids that were consistently just under our proposals." "What happens now?" "Jennifer's employment with our firm has been terminated, effective immediately. We're also considering whether to pursue legal action for breach of fiduciary duty and corporate espionage." "And David?" "That's a matter for law enforcement and the state licensing board. But I can tell you that several other firms in the area have reported similar experiences with Mr. Crane's business practices." After Margaret hung up, I sat back in my chair, feeling the weight of what I'd set in motion. Jennifer's career was over. Her reputation in the local architectural community was destroyed, and David Crane was about to discover that small-town justice could be more devastating than anything the courts might dish out. The second call came at 9:30. Lisa Martinez sounded frantic. "Jake, Jennifer's here, and she's completely falling apart. She got fired this morning, and she's talking about doing something desperate." "Define desperate." "She wants to drive to David's dealership and confront him publicly. She's convinced that if she can just make him understand how much she sacrificed for their relationship, he'll change his mind about ending things." "Let her go." "Jake, she's not thinking clearly. She could do something that gets her arrested. That's her choice to make." "What if she gets hurt?" "Then maybe she'll finally understand the consequences of her actions." Lisa was quiet for a moment. "You've changed, Jake. This isn't like you." "No," I said. "This is exactly like me. It just took me a while to figure that out." I hung up and drove to the center of town, parking across the street from David's dealership. I wanted to be there when Jennifer arrived, not to intervene, but to witness the final act of the drama I'd orchestrated. I didn't have to wait long. Jennifer's car pulled into the dealership lot at 10:15, and I could see her sitting behind the wheel for several minutes, probably gathering her courage. When she finally got out, her movements were jerky and determined, like someone who'd made a decision they weren't entirely comfortable with. She walked into the showroom, and through the large windows, I could see her talking animatedly to the receptionist. A few minutes later, David appeared, looking uncomfortable and trapped. Their conversation quickly escalated into an argument, with Jennifer gesturing wildly and David glancing nervously at the other customers in the showroom. Then Jennifer did something I hadn't expected. She pulled out her phone and started recording their conversation, speaking loudly enough that everyone in the showroom could hear her accusations about their affair, his promises about her career, and his recent abandonment of their relationship. David tried to take the phone away from her, and their struggle knocked over a display of automotive accessories, sending parts and promotional materials scattering across the showroom floor. Other customers began pulling out their own phones, recording the spectacle. Within minutes, the parking lot was filling with curious onlookers drawn by the commotion. Someone must have called the police because I could hear sirens approaching from the direction of downtown. I got out of my truck and walked closer, joining the crowd of people watching through the showroom windows as Jennifer and David continued their very public breakdown. Jennifer was crying now, begging David to reconsider, promising to leave her husband and start over somewhere new. David's response was cold and calculating. "Jennifer, what we had was never serious. You're a married woman having a midlife crisis, and I was convenient. But I never promised you anything permanent, and I'm not going to destroy my marriage for someone else's fantasy." The crowd outside gasped audibly. Someone in the back called out, "Tell him, honey," and a few people actually applauded. That's when I saw Lisa Martinez push through the crowd, her face pale with worry. She spotted me and hurried over. "Jake, you have to do something. She's humiliating herself." "She's telling the truth," I said, for probably the first time in months. "This isn't justice. This is cruelty. Sometimes they're the same thing." The police arrived just as Jennifer threw David's business card holder at the showroom window, creating a spider web of cracks in the expensive glass. Officers Patricia Wells and Mike Rodriguez entered the building and began trying to calm the situation. Through the window, I could see Patricia talking to Jennifer while Mike spoke with David. After a few minutes, they escorted Jennifer outside, where she sat on the curb with her head in her hands, while Patricia filled out paperwork. David emerged a few minutes later, looking shaken and angry. He spotted me in the crowd and walked over, his face flushed with rage. "Are you satisfied?" he demanded. "You've destroyed her completely." "I didn't destroy her," I said calmly. "I just stopped enabling her self-destruction." "You orchestrated this whole thing. The recordings, the investigation, probably even convincing her to come here today." "I didn't convince her to do anything. I just gave her the information she needed to make informed decisions." "You're a vindictive, small-minded man who couldn't handle losing his wife to someone better." I looked at David, this man who'd spent months manipulating my wife for personal and professional gain, and felt nothing but contempt. "You want to know what I think, David? I think you're a predator who targets vulnerable women and uses their insecurities against them. I think you saw Jennifer as an easy mark. Ambitious, underappreciated, and married to a blue-collar husband she thought was beneath her. That's not... I think you fed her ego, made her feel sophisticated and important, then used her feelings to extract confidential information that you could use against her own firm. And when you were done with her, you threw her away like garbage." David's face was getting redder. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I think you're exactly the kind of man who gives successful people a bad name. Someone who confuses manipulation with intelligence, exploitation with ambition. At least I'm not a bitter loser who has to destroy other people to feel important." I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. "You're right, David. I am bitter, but I'm not a loser. Because at the end of this, I still have my integrity, my reputation, and my self-respect. What do you have?" David looked around at the crowd of people, all of them staring at him with expressions ranging from disgust to amusement. His showroom window was cracked, his business was about to be investigated by the state, and his personal life was now public entertainment for the entire town. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "Yes, it is," I replied. "You're done here, David. Your business is finished, your reputation is destroyed, and everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of man you are. The smart thing would be to pack up and start over somewhere else, somewhere people don't know your story." David opened his mouth to respond, then seemed to think better of it. He turned and walked back toward his damaged showroom, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I watched Jennifer being helped into Patricia's patrol car, probably for her own protection as much as anything else. She looked up and saw me standing in the crowd, and for a moment our eyes met. I saw recognition there, and understanding. She knew that I'd orchestrated her downfall as methodically as I'd once renovated our house. She knew that every move she'd made over the past few days had been anticipated and planned for. But I also saw something else. Relief. The burden of maintaining her double life was finally over. The pretense of loving two men simultaneously was finished. The exhausting work of managing lies and alibis was complete. Patricia's car pulled away, taking Jennifer to whatever came next in her story. The crowd began to disperse, people heading back to their jobs and their lives, carrying with them a story they'd be telling for years. Lisa approached me as I walked back toward my truck. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now Jennifer deals with the consequences of her choices. David probably leaves town, and I get on with my life." "Do you feel better, now that you've gotten your revenge?" I considered the question seriously. Did I feel better? Jennifer's career was destroyed, her marriage was over, and her reputation in this town would never recover. David's business was ruined, his personal life was in shambles, and he'd probably have to start over in a new state. "I feel like justice was served," I said finally. "They made choices, and now they're living with the results." "That's not the same as feeling better." "No," I agreed, "but it's enough." I drove home to my empty house, the house I'd built with my own hands, the house that had been the foundation of a marriage that turned out to be built on lies. I sat on my back porch with a beer, watching the rain fall on the garden Jennifer had planted but never maintained. Tomorrow, I would start the process of rebuilding my life. I would file for divorce, sell the house, maybe move to a different town where I could start fresh. I would take the skills I'd learned in construction and apply them to the work of creating something new from the rubble of what had been destroyed. But tonight, I just sat in the rain, listening to the sound of water washing everything clean. The phone rang once more before I went to bed. It was Patricia Wells. "Jake, I wanted to let you know that Jennifer's okay. We took her to the hospital for evaluation, but she's not hurt, just shaken up. Thank you for telling me. There's something else. David Crane came to the station this evening. He's filing a complaint against you for harassment and vandalism." "Is he?" "He doesn't have much evidence, and given what came out today about his business practices, I don't think it's going anywhere. But I wanted to give you a heads up." "I appreciate that. Jake, for what it's worth, I think you handled this better than most men would have. You could have gotten violent, could have done something really stupid. Instead, you let the truth do the work." "The truth has a way of taking care of itself," I said. "Sometimes it just needs a little help getting out." After Patricia hung up, I walked through my house one last time, turning off lights and checking locks. In a few months, this would all be someone else's problem. Someone else would live in the rooms I'd renovated, sleep in the bedroom where my marriage had died, cook in the kitchen where Jennifer and I had once planned our future together. But that was okay. I'd built this house once, and I could build another one. Maybe not in this town, maybe not with the same floor plan, but I could build something new. After all, that's what I did for a living. I turned off the last light and went to bed, listening to the rain on the roof I'd repaired so many times, the roof that had finally stopped leaking. Outside, the storm was ending, and tomorrow would bring clear skies.